The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod and we are webcasting to you live from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders headquarters in Tarzana, California. So thrilled to have you here with us on a Thursday morning. We're going to be with you live for the next 2 hours. We're going to talk about autism from a 360-degree perspective, and we've got some amazing experts who are going to be joining us to answer your questions and to talk about some pretty interesting topics. So all of this is meant to be completely interactive. We want your input, we want your feedback, we want your questions. This show is meant to be a conversation between all of us. I always like to say here on the show that when we use the full amount of our resources, pretty much anything is possible. And if you're new to us and joining us today, I want to welcome you because I think that Autism Live is a great and growing resource. We want to encourage you to participate in whatever way makes sense for your life, whether you're a parent, teacher, practitioner, and you're looking for some practical tips about how do I create an environment in which more progress is going to happen with this individual or this group of individuals that I'm working with, or you yourself are on the autism spectrum and you have something to say and you have things that you want help in gaining resources to. We want to be here to connect you to the things that are going to help you to get where you want to go. There's so much that's going on in the autism community, and yes, there isn't enough. I'm never going to sit here and say to you that, oh, well, you know, we solved this, we can all go home and there's enough resources for everything that's out there. No, that's not the reality. But the truth is there are many different things, and if we can connect the dots, we can help you to find the resources that you're looking for. Whether you are brand new to this and your child is 2 years old and just was diagnosed on the autism spectrum, or you have a teenager who is on the spectrum and you're trying to figure out that difficult transition to adulthood, or you yourself, you know, are on the spectrum and older and saying, I have something valid to bring to this conversation about what I think needs to be happening legislatively and educationally with our kids who are on the spectrum. Everybody gets a voice here, right? And there are resources for everyone here to help you as you make that progress. So we hope you'll participate. Emily's going to show you some of the varied ways that you can get in touch with us here. I'll remind you that our homepage is autism-live.com. When you go there, you'll see that we have a lovely website that's there and many different things you can do, including check out our blog. But you'll also see a computer screen. If you click on the little triangle that's there, you can be watching the live show or the most recently recorded live show and scroll through those recently recorded live shows. Off to the side, you'll see that there's a place where it will tell you what question we're answering right now from our viewers at home, and there's a place for you to input the answer, the question or the answer that you would like to add to the conversation. It's totally free. I am so proud of the fact that everything that we do here for you is free, and I hope that we can continue that happening. And the way that you can help for us to continue that happening is by spreading the word. Let others know that this is happening. When we get higher viewership, we're able to do more things. There's some things on my to-do list, my wish list, that if we had some more viewers, I think we could make a reality, right? In any case, type the information that you want in there, hit enter. It shows up here on my screen. There is a bit of a time lag. It's about a minute and a half. So especially when we have guests who are here, make sure that you enter your question early and not at the end, because then the guest leaves and then I see the question and it makes me unhappy because I feel like I've let you down. So put your questions in early and often, just like what they say about voting. Vote early and often. And that way, that's the best formula I can give you for getting your questions answered in real time. But by the way, you don't have to be watching the live show to pose a question of a guest that we have on the show. A lot of our guests are recurring guests, and we always have a way of getting in contact with them. So let's say that you were watching the show on Tuesday. Let's say you were watching Tuesday's show, but you were watching it on Friday. You saw Deborah Hosseini from The Art of Autism, and you say, oh, I really wanted to ask her a question. You still can. Just go in the live feature. It's open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and say, I have a question for Deborah Hosseini from Art of Autism. I want to know, and I will make sure that that question gets to Deborah, and we'll get you an answer. It's always best, since we don't know who you are, you have complete anonymity on that live feature. If you specifically want us to get back to you, not just answering it here on the live show, make sure you include some information of how we can get back to you and be clear about what it is you'd like for us to get back to you about. If it's a study that you heard us talking about and you want to know how to access the study, make sure that you are very detailed with that. All right, I like to remind you at the start of the show that I will be talking about autism, but I am not an expert. We have experts on the show, and I'm always thrilled to bring you the experts. I'm thrilled to hear the experts because I'm a parent. My son was diagnosed with autism at the age of 2.5. That was a life shift for me. And if somebody had said to me 8.5 years ago that I would be sitting here and talking to you about autism in this format, I would have laughed myself off the chair. That was not what I had planned, right? But life has a way of saying, excuse me, there's something I want to talk to you about. You need to look over here. And so here we are, and I couldn't be more grateful because my child has made incredible progress and continues to make incredible progress because of the information and resources, the kinds of things that we talk about on this show. I have a lot to pay forward. So I want you to know it's personal with me. When you write in and say, hey, I need some help about this, I take it very personally and want to help you in any way that I can. So take advantage of that. How many other people are out there saying that to you? Bring it. Bring it. Be a part of the family. I always say, si se puede, we can do this. If we share resources and if we share information, there's so much that we can do. All right, I'll get off my soapbox for a second. In any case, we like to start out the morning with something we fondly refer to as the jargon of the day. This is the jargon du jour, when we take on one word, one phrase, one acronym, and we try to make sense of it within our lives. I was absolutely adamant about this when we were formulating the show, and the show's gone through lots of changes, but I've kept the jargon of the day because I think it's important. We can talk about all kinds of things, but if we don't understand the terms that the experts use, we're not going to get as far as we could. So we cycle through these terms, and I hear you guys asking questions, and I know you're getting it. You're making me so proud. And this helps me too, because I need to go back over these terms and go, okay, wait, that's what that is, and that's how I can use it with my child. So today's jargon, I'm told, is one that we've never used in its purest form before. So that's very kind of exciting. We've talked about it in lots of other aspects, but today our term is prompt. Now, I don't know about you, but to me, this means being on time. And that's not what it means in the autism community. And this is how the jargon can be very confusing. If you are somebody who has previously taught English, then what you think is that it's something that gets somebody started. You're getting warm now. Let's take a look at what our actual definition of a prompt is when we're talking about it within ABA. ABA, of course, being applied behavior analysis, which is the only scientifically proven effective treatment for autism that helps all kids with autism. It also helps all individuals, right? So in any case, I know there is no one size fits all with autism. There isn't. And what helps one child is going to be vastly different from what helps another child. But ABA is going to be effective at creating some form of progress with all of our kids. So it's one of the reasons why insurance companies are funding it. It's one of the reasons why we talk about it. There are lots of things that we talk about. Don't get me wrong. ABA is not everything in terms of autism. But it's certainly a really important component that we can talk about that works for all of our kids. And by the way, it doesn't just work for 3-year-olds, it works for 18-year-olds as well, because it works for 88-year-olds. And it doesn't just work for individuals on the spectrum, works for all of us. So if you're wanting to, change a behavior in your significant other, we'll talk about that later, ABA. Anyway, so prompt. This is an added stimulus that increases the probability that the SD will occasion the desired response. And ladies and gentlemen, this is why we do the jargon of the day. Because great, okay, I walked into this jargon thinking that prompt meant being on time. Now I've got somebody telling me it's an added stimulus. What? And that increases the probability that the SD, what on earth are we talking about? Okay, those are jargon that we'll focus on another day. And this is why we don't just give you the actual definition, we also give you a working definition. So our working definition is a prompt is a cue or some form of assistance given to encourage the desired response from a learner. So we do this all the time as parents. We prompt things all the time, and we do this as teachers all the time. We may not know that that's what we're doing, but we're prompting. So if your child is there and you're saying goodbye to someone and you say to your child, say goodbye, that's a prompt. That's a verbal prompt. You're prompting the child, telling them, this is what I want you to do. It's a cue, it's a form of assistance, and it's trying to encourage the right response from the learner. I'm trying to teach my child to say goodbye, or to say thank you, or to say you're welcome. So I'm prompting them. Now, when my child is just learning how to say thank you, I probably am going to, depending on their receptive language, what they're able to hear and understand, a verbal cue might be the ideal thing, right? I might say, I might say thank you. I'm actually telling them exactly what to say. But then further on down the line, we don't do that anymore, right? We say, what do you say? Because they already know the response, but we're still cueing it, right? It's just a step back. And with prompts, we always want to be doing that, because we always want to be pulling our prompts back to where they still work, right? We don't want to pull the prompts back so far that the child looks at us and goes, what? So when we say, what do you say? And the child's like, I have no idea what you want me to say in this instance, right? Then we'd have to go back to say thank you. Oh, okay, thank you. Great, we got the desired response. Yeah, we had to prompt it, but the truth of the matter is we have to do that a lot before anyone learns anything. And with our kids on the autism spectrum, we have to prompt that much more. We have to give them that many more opportunities, and it's probably going to take us a little bit longer. Patience, right? So important, though, that we remember to fade prompts over time. Like I said, you're probably already doing this in your life, but when you go now to your child's clinic, or you're talking to your child's teacher or their therapist, and they're saying, well, we're going to prompt and we're going to fade the prompt, you're going to know what it is they're talking about. But remember, a prompt isn't necessarily just a verbal prompt, right? Sometimes a prompt is a physical prompt. A physical prompt, if I'm wanting a child to touch a button, I might do a hand over hand full physical prompt, and very gently but firmly, not hurting anybody, not leaving any marks, I'm going to say touch the button, and I guide their hand over, not the big huge struggle, right? This is not torture, but I guide their hand over and yes, good job, you touched the button. Now that's a full physical prompt. So if I say to a child, touch the button, and I do this and I go, yes, you touched the button, the child goes, oh, I'm not sure what I did, but they're happy, great. And I say, touch the button. Now the child, depending on their rate of learning, might automatically reach over and touch the button, and I go, yes, that's amazing, and I give the child something wonderful because they did it all on their own. A lot of kids aren't going to be able to do it the second time without a physical prompt. But I'm not going to keep full physical prompting because they're never going to do it on their own. That's not learning. So I'm going to fade that prompt over time. So I'll say, touch the button, and I might wait a millisecond, and my hand might come over and just very lightly lay hand over hand, not full, hand over hand, and gently, guide over. Yes, good job. Then the next time my hand might come and not even touch them, but move with them to remind them, right? The next time my hand might just point, right? I'm fading that prompt, and then eventually the child does it on their own. Now, Sometimes you fade the prompt too fast. So let's say that I get to the point where I point and the child doesn't do it, right? When that happens, you go back to the last prompt that was successful. You don't go all the way back to the beginning. You go back to the one that was successful. So the very gentle hand, almost touching, not touching worked. I go back to that. And if that doesn't work, then I go back one step further. There are other kinds of prompts as well. We can do a textual prompt where I hold up a sign that says, what it is that I want them to do. We have this all over the place in our lives. When we walk into a business and we don't know where to stand in line and it says line forms here, that's a textual prompt. Textual prompt that they're giving us text telling us what they want us to do. Yes, some people still go stand in the place where it says pay here, right? And then somebody else will say to them, hey, this is where the line is, right? So they get the verbal prompt. This doesn't stop when children turn a certain age, right? We do this with adults all the time. We can give a model prompt. So if I want the child to cover their mouth when they cough, I might go like this and cover my mouth, and I might do it with my elbow to show them the way we're supposed to be teaching them now. I'm modeling the behavior that I want them to do. Lots of different kinds of prompts. We participate in this all the time. So important that we know what a prompt is, how we use it, all the different kinds of prompts that we can use to cue that behavior, and how to fade them successfully so that eventually the child is doing it completely on their own. Prompts are a great teaching tool, So we encourage you to use them. And now that's what it's called. You were doing it before. It's not a new concept, but now that now you can start to think about it and think, okay, well, this thing that I've been trying to teach my child, have I used all these different kinds of prompts to try to make this behavior happen? Have I modeled this behavior? I haven't. Maybe I'll go back and do that. And sometimes that can be a really great way of looking at things. All right. That's our jargon for today. Moving on, we always have a question of the day for you. We love asking you these questions and seeing your responses on our Facebook page. We encourage you to go there. It's Autism Live on Facebook. I also would encourage you to like it and share it with other people. Spread the word. We're here for people, and it's a free resource. And then answer the question of the day. And our question today is, what helps you to stop procrastinating? Oh my goodness. I don't know about you, but I am really good at procrastinating. It's something I have perfected over time, and sometimes I thoroughly enjoy it, which is really, really wrong. There's a bunch of new studies, though, on procrastination, and hopefully we'll have a little bit of time later on today to talk about that. But in the meantime, we want to know from you guys, what helps you to stop procrastinating? I have to be honest that I shared a little bit about this the other day. I like to play little games with myself. I read a great article the other day, and I wrote down the author was James Clear. Clear as in C-L-E-A-R. And he talks about the 2-minute rule, and it's pretty much something that I do from time to time. We talked about chunking last week, but this idea of when things are really horrible or harder, I just don't feel like doing them. If I say to myself, I just have to do it for this amount of time. He says, give yourself the 2-minute thing and say, I just have to do it for 2 minutes. And then a lot of times you discover, oh, this isn't so bad. I'm just going to keep doing it, right? I hate doing housework. I just hate it. I don't know about the rest of you. I love having a clean house, but I really hate doing housework. And there are times when I just, doing the dishes, I just think is one of the least gratifying things on the face of the planet. I'd be happy to come to your house and do dishes. I find it very relaxing to go to somebody else's house and do dishes and wash them. But when it's my own dishes, I don't know why it's so overwhelming to me. I could just weep. But so I make it a game. And I learned as a teenager to do that, just make it a game. And so, if we're watching something on TV, I'll say, okay, I don't have to load the entire dishwasher, or I don't have to unload the entire dishwasher. I just have to put in, 10 things. And as soon as I do 10 things, then I can stop. And, some days I'll put 10 things and I'll go, great, my program's back on, I'm done. That's all I'm going to do for right now. But if I do that for 3 commercials, pretty much that's it, right? A lot of times what happens though is I say, well, I'm just going to put 10 things in and the commercials are still running and I end up finishing and loading the entire dishwasher. So that's what helps me, is turning things into a game and taking the pressure off and having some aspect of it that's rewarding for me. I just have to do this, making it shorter and sometimes it'll be, can I get 45 things in the dishwasher before the commercial is over? Or before the timer goes on the microwave because I'm making something for somebody and, I've got a minute and a half. How much can I get done in that minute and a half? To me, for some reason, that works for me. It's different people, different strokes, right? But we want to know what helps you, because maybe it's something that would also help us. So, there we go. Okay. For a minute, the live feature, I said it's up 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and for a minute it was not up. So there we are. We're back now. If you want to be writing something in on the live feature, it is back up now. All right. So that's our question for the day. I'm procrastinating going on to the topic of the week, so let's stop that. We always have a topic of the week, and this week, as I mentioned earlier, we talked about chunking last week. This week, we're talking about kicking it up a notch and taking action. It's so easy to get overwhelmed. And as an autism parent, oh my goodness, I remember the day that I sat in my living room and said, I have used the word overwhelmed so many times, I'm not even sure that I know what it means. And I looked it up in the dictionary to see, what does overwhelmed mean? And then I wanted to look up what whelmed means, because if you're overwhelmed, what is whelmed? And whelmed is underwater. So when you're overwhelmed, you're overdoing being underwater. I think it's a pretty apt description of what it feels to be an autism parent a lot of the time. I think all of us, whether we're autism parents or not, get overwhelmed. But I know for a fact that being an autism parent can be very overwhelming. Balancing what you need to do with what you can do, with what you might be able to do, with what you should know and don't know. Right? It's easy to get so frenetic that I used to say I would become the amazing paralyzed woman. That there were so many things to do that I would just stop and freeze and go, I can't even move. So it's really important for me personally to remember that every day I got to take a little bit of action, that it's amazing what can happen when we take just one little action every day. It puts it in a bite-sized morsel, makes it much easier to handle, reduces our stress. In fact, we talked about on Tuesday, when you take a little action, doesn't have to be a huge action, a little action. So today we're going to be talking about, we talked on Tuesday about what we can do for ourselves. Today we're going to talk a little bit about taking some action on some key things having to do with our children who are on the autism spectrum, whether they are 3 years old or they are 15, knowing when to start, where to start, and teach skills, but also being able to look at the other side of it, how to reduce some of the behaviors that are really hard to crack, right? I've got 2 great experts that are going to be with us to talk about both of those things. So what we have going on the show today, we will yes, I need to breathe. We will be joined in just a few minutes by Dr. Adel Najdowski. We call that segment Real Progress with Dr. Adel. She helps us to be able to access things that we can do to teach our children new skills so that they can grow and progress. And when I say children, I'm not just talking, I'm talking about the people that we either brought into this planet or signed up to be responsible for in this planet, because sometimes our children are adults, right? So talking about the full gamut of when we're parents and we're working with an individual on the spectrum and how we can help to create that real progress. But if you're a teacher practitioner, the same applies for you as well, right? And then a little bit later, we're going to have time for a funding tip. I like to get to that whenever we possibly can, because we can take some action right now today to help with funding. And then in the second hour, we're going to be joined by Dr. Jonathan Tarbox. I've asked him to come in and talk about what we know between research research and experience about how to reduce those repetitive behaviors that appear to be automatically reinforced. How do we get at those behaviors and turn those behaviors around to either make them functional or to have them fade into the distance and have something else take its place? I know it's a burning question for a lot of us who have kids on the autism spectrum, so Dr. Tarbox will be here to talk about that with us. All right. All of that and ever so much more, including your questions. I know you guys have written some things in already for our guests. We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back after these messages.
When you find out you're having a boy, you always think like, oh, he's going to play football, he's going to do this and that. And then when he's diagnosed, all those things get washed away.
It's like that piece that's always in the back of your mind, you know, where is he, what is he doing, is he safe?
We really didn't know what we were dealing with. I wish that they could have directed me a little bit more and provided me some information.
I was a young mom. I didn't know what it was like to raise a boy, despite a boy with autism.
Hundreds of thousands of families are not getting the help they need for their children with autism all around the country. ACT Today is determined to bridge the gap. These families really have to go through a lot to get a grant. The application process isn't easy. The records, the diagnosis proof, they're really battling for their kids. So when we can give them a grant, it is so wonderful to see that they succeed in getting that help for their children. Our founder, Dr. Doreen Graham-Pichet, is an amazing woman, and she is one of the world's foremost authority on behavior of children with autism. She's extremely knowledgeable, and she oversees every single grant we give. She is part of that process. People may think of autism care and treatment as simply schooling or therapy, but we provide important safety supports, things like fencing, for example. The whole family's living in fear of that child running out into traffic. I recently delivered an iPad to a little boy with some of the apps that are out there for children with autism. Miracles happen.
I got the iPad from ACT.
From ACT,
What
yes.
did it say? Can you repeat that, Dustin?
I got the iPad from ACT.
We have helped so many military families, and when I think of these brave families that are fighting two battles, one to protect our country and one for the right treatment and care for their children, it breaks my heart, and I think we have to do more as a nation to help them.
There's not a day that doesn't go by that we don't think about it. Some people say, oh, he's normal. You don't see the battles that I see every single day. My husband does have to deploy, and when they get on that bus, that might be the last time that my kids ever see them.
So I called, and then they informed me that he had received the grant, which was like a blessing from above. I was just like speechless. I just started to cry because, without it, we would have been lost.
The ACT grant was a total miracle. Without that, they wouldn't be able to receive the service dog. So we're so appreciative what they've done for us as a family.
Recently, ACT Today funded a program for military children with autism in San Diego, the Inclusion Films program, which is run by Joey Travolta, and teaches kids on the autism spectrum literal filmmaking skills. They learn how to make a movie.
Are we ready? There you go, got it. Mark it. Okay. Everything that goes into the process of making a film goes into everyday life. So they're learning life skills, they're learning to collaborate.
It was really nice to know how much they were enjoying this camp, and they're with people who are supporting them and are making them feel great about themselves and their differences and their similarities. And I get two kids that are working together and apart and together and apart, so it's an interrelationship as well as a camp and a learning experience.
It's so fulfilling when I get letters. One stands out for me, a boy who was 14 with Asperger's, and we gave him a grant to go to a drama camp. He wrote to us and said, "Dear ACT Today, thank you for letting me belong for the first time in my life." These kids are remarkable. We underestimate them. They're so knowledgeable, they're so capable, and we can change the life of a family, which means changing the life of a community.
Welcome back to Autism Live. We are joined right now by our very special guest, Dr. Adel Najdowski. Welcome.
Nice to see you again.
Good to see you. And we call this segment with you Real Progress with Dr. Adel because I love how you get into how it's our topic for this week of taking action. And you are very helpful with, I know with me as a parent and with other people of saying, you know, this is how we're going to get into action. This is all manageable and helping us to access how we teach skills to our kids.
Yes.
And we should say that you were one of the co-creators of Skills, a product that we talk about. It's a tool that we talk a lot about on the show, and at some point I'm sure that we'll be talking about that with this discussion. But I asked Dr. Najdowski to talk with us today about where do we start? And I just filled her in on the fact that yesterday during Ask Dr. Doreen, and we had this topic scheduled anyway, but sometimes it's just kismet. We had a parent who wrote in yesterday and said there's a bunch of behaviors that my child is engaging in, and there's a bunch of things that my child can't do. And, you know, we could sense the overwhelm from this parent. And I was talking about, you know, sometimes we sit and we look at the sea of things that our kid is behind in, and there's so much to be done and we don't feel empowered, and the first step is knowing where to start.
Yeah.
And that can be really enough to stop us in our tracks right there.
Yeah, and the absolute real first step is figuring out what are the deficiencies, because you might be saying that someone knows that their child is not engaging in a lot of skills or they're missing a lot of things, but they might actually not know exactly what those are. They just know they're not doing things. You know what I mean? And
I think it's so important that we talk about, you know, about that, because every child is going to be different and where their deficits are going to be different.
Yeah.
And I always think of it like a sweater, that you're knitting a sweater and you get, you know, 2 rows in, but you drop a stitch. So there's a hole in the sweater and you keep stitching, and there's other stitches that are there, but there's a hole way back in row 2.
Yeah, and if you don't have proper assessment done to try to figure out what all the holes are, and you're just going off of kind of like, you know, what you kind of see every day, you might start trying to teach something and your son or daughter may not be getting it and you don't know why, and it turns out that there's a hole back here that is a prerequisite to this thing you're trying to teach right now, and you're just kind of like up against a wall and it's not working.
And you get frustrated and they get frustrated when the reality was that you didn't start at the right lesson.
Yeah.
It's easy to do. Teachers do this all the time because they're supposed to be teaching the curriculum, right? But you can't teach the curriculum if the hole is 2 years back.
Yeah, that can happen in regular education, for example. If a kid is allowed to pass and go to the next grade, but they're really missing some foundational skills from the previous grade, if they'll review in the beginning, but if they're not getting it, they're moving on.
Yeah.
And so now things really fall apart because it's these other things that never were solid.
Right.
And we're already working on something that's too advanced now.
Yeah, and it gets so overwhelming. But the good news is when you identify where the hole is and you go back and repair that hole, the structure of the whole sweater gets that much stronger.
Exactly,
right?
Yeah.
And we have seen this time and time again, and if anybody is a teacher, you know this, when you can identify what the skill is that the child is deficient in and you can fill that hole, then the child makes huge leaps forward.
Yeah.
Because they're able to take all the other things they know and put that together with this skill, and then they can fly. It's really very powerful. But for a parent, we go, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know where to start, and I don't know where the holes are. So getting an assessment got to be the first thing.
Yeah, so I would recommend doing some sort of curriculum assessment. Skills is one option, obviously, but there's many others out there as well. And figuring out where all the holes are. And then from there, look at each of your options. Okay, now I've done this assessment, and it probably will produce some sort of a result for you to show you, you know, the different areas of development and where your child's lying within those. So then you're going to see, okay, she has major deficits in her language and whatever, but not in this other area. So then you prioritize and you say, okay, how much am I going to really work with my child? If I'm going to be doing 40 hours a week, I can work on a lot. If I'm only going to be doing 10 hours a week, I have to pick only a few. So that's a huge
it's huge determinant. But I want to go back to the assessment just a little bit because, we mentioned there's lots of different ways that you can get an assessment. I would say, though, that you can go and go to a center and get an assessment, but if you don't sit down with them afterwards and go through that assessment with a fine-tooth comb, all you're going to have is an assessment, and your teachers and your ABA providers will know where the holes are, but you as a parent won't know.
Yeah, and actually that's a good point, because sometimes assessments, the way they produce the results, just kind of show like your child's age equivalence or something like that for where are they functioning right now in a particular area. So let's say that they're actually 8 years old chronologically, but they do this assessment and they find out they're functioning at a 4-year-old level at like their language skills or something. So then you go, okay, so I know that they're really behind, but you don't know what language skills you need to work on.
Yeah, that's so useful to me. We're behind, but I still don't know where to start, right? And we're laughing about this because it's the ridiculousness of it. But the truth of the matter is that when that happens, you feel like, great. So now I know we're behind.
You don't really want an assessment that just produces a quotient or a score or something that just tells you how old your child is functioning at for where they should be or something like that. You actually need something that actually links to curriculum. So if you're going to do some kind of assessment, make sure that you're looking for something that has a link to curriculum, because if it doesn't link, then now you're being given the duty of going through that assessment item by item, picking out the ones, okay, reading the item, okay, what could I do to teach that, and then coming up with some sort of activity or lesson. It's a lot more work.
Yeah, you can get into the really overwhelmed. Now, I will say that you were a part of skills and creating skills, and you had this in mind. So there is an assessment portion of skills it's quite extensive.
Yeah.
Every question that you could possibly think of in there, it will take some time. It's an investment in your child.
Yeah. One thing I've been kind of laughing about this lately is I've been meeting with all of these CARD families, and we're going over their child's skills accounts. And most of them filled out the assessment like 2 years ago. And so they're not mad about it anymore.
Oh, that's lovely.
So basically, it's fun for us to joke around, and I say, like, at first they don't even remember what it is. Isn't that funny? Like, you go through all this pain doing something, and then you say, like, that was awful, and then you literally forget, and it's not a big deal anymore. But then I remind them, do you remember sitting down and answering a lot of questions where you wanted to pull your hair out, and they, that thing, I remember now.
So, and I'm glad that you say that and reference that, because that is how you will feel. And you can't do it all in one day, and you can't do it all in 1 week, I don't think, even, unless you were really motivated and had really good child care. You got to pace yourself because you want to answer the questions appropriately. And it is frustrating because they ask you questions, and there are times when you have an emotional response and you're like, really? Is he supposed to be able to do that? I didn't even know he was supposed to be able to do that. And then you get bogged in the emotion, right? But it's so worth it. Having said all of those things, it's so worth it because I'm a visual person, and when I was done, I had so many different visual ways that I could look at and go, oh my goodness, I didn't know that my child's receptive language is that high. I didn't know that I had that plus for my child. And look where his expressive language is, and look where he is with this. And I could see exactly how far behind he was in a picture.
Yeah,
and where.
And it's a lot of work up front, but it's front-loaded work that later goes away because once you've done it, you're done with it, and you don't have to do it anymore. The way that it works, it just keeps updating as you're finding the lessons that are linked to the deficiencies, then you introduce them, and then you master them, and you move to the next thing. And if in that process you realize he learned something along the way, then you'll give him credit for that too, and the whole system tracks and everything like that. So. And also, people don't have to answer all the questions before they can get started. They can work on a few. Everything's in levels. It goes from level 1 to 12. They could just start in levels 1, 2, and 3 for a little while, and then come back later.
Or you could pick an area. If you know that your child, your area of concern, and we're going to talk about priorities in a second. If you know your area of concern is social, just go in and answer the social skills questions and start to work on those. And eventually, when you have more time, you can go and answer the ones in the other 7 curricular areas. So it's really, I think it's wonderful. Even if you've already gone and had a big professional assessment that you paid for, I still think it's worth it to do the skills assessment. I always say it empowers the parent, and all of that work that you've done in that assessment will come in handy in so many ways that you can't even imagine. I did not expect that work was going to make my IEP process so much easier, but it did. That was not one of the payoffs that I was planning on, and yet it did. So I encourage you to do that. You can go to Skills for Autism is the place to go. .com, and you can check that out, and you can check out all of Skills. But then when we're going to take a break, And when we come back, we're going to talk about, okay, once you've done the assessment and you know where the deficits are, and hopefully you've got it tied to a curriculum like you would in skills, then how do you know which lessons do you start with? It's a whole other area. But Dr. Najdowski can tell you some really quick cheats that help you to be smarter than and more educated than you were 5 minutes ago. So stick with us.
Skills is an online program that provides assessment, curriculum, positive behavior support planning for challenging behavior, and progress tracking, and it does this all in one place. The skills assessment and curriculum addresses 8 areas of development, which even includes advanced higher level areas such as executive functions and cognition, which pretty much makes skills the only ABA-based set of curricula for teaching more complex skills, things like problem solving, planning, self-management, perspective taking, and even inferring and predicting others' private events. Skills is a 4-step system. Step 1 is to add the child to your account. Step 2 is to start assessment. The skills assessment is the only ABA-based assessment with psychometric research demonstrating the language subscale to have excellent reliability. Every area of human functioning and typical child development from infancy to adolescence was researched, making the skills assessment the most comprehensive of its kind in the world, and we're quite proud of that.
Skills is easy to use. Simply click Start Assessment and begin answering questions. Or simply type in a keyword, find specific activities to assess, and add activities to treatment. Step 3. Choose activities. Once you've completed the assessment, Skills selects from a pool of 4,000 activities categorized by age, level, and skill type to provide you with exactly those activities each child needs. Start by choosing a curriculum, then a lesson, and finally an activity. Click the information icon to view prerequisites, ages in which targets develop, examples, and IEP goals. Click the video icon to watch a short video. Once you've identified an activity you want to teach, adding activities to treatment is a snap. Step 4. Start treatment. Here you can access customizable activity lesson details, add your own customized targets and exemplars, and edit an activity status such as introducing or mastering it. You can even print handouts such as worksheets, tracking forms, visual aids, and other materials. Skills also offers multiple progress charts mapping curriculum progress, lesson progress, and cumulative number of activities and targets mastered over time. The Skills language curriculum is categorized by verbal behavior type so that users can identify progress for verbal operants, such as echoics, mans, tacs, and interverbals.
Skills is one of the only programs that provides the ability to write behavior intervention plans, or BIPs, for challenging behavior.
With just a few clicks, the outline of the behavior intervention plan is written for you and ready to be printed and implemented.
You can learn more about Skills today and get started by visiting us at www.skillsforautism.com, or you can call us at 877-975-4559. Skills. Progress starts here.
Welcome back to Autism Live. We are here with Dr. Adel Najdowski for a segment that we call Real Progress with Dr. Adel. We've been talking about how do we start and where do we start when working on ABA with one of our children. And when I say children, I'm not just talking about 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds. I'm saying our children, right? Our children can be adult children, right? Where do we start if we want to work on a skill? And you were saying one of the first things we have to do is know where we are. Where are the deficits? Where do we need to shore up? But once we get a really good assessment and have a really good picture of where we are and we know what the deficits are, I still feel as a parent that even if it's, and we talked about having it tied to a curriculum, like in Skills, you can take the assessment, it's tied to a curriculum and give you a pool of lessons to pick from, but there's still the question of where do I start?
Yeah.
So help us, because I know you've got some great tips.
Okay, so if you're using an assessment that's tied to a curriculum, the nice thing about that is it's going to be all probably in some sort of progression. Mm-hmm. So the progression might be developmental, like going by age level, or going by some kind of level system. So sometimes it might be beginning, intermediate, advanced, or just start at certain age skills, things like that. So if you do the assessment, then you can kind of go down to the bottom of that and look at the youngest skills that your child's missing, or the items in the lowest level, like the beginning level, and figure out where those holes are, and those are good places to start. But in doing that as well, you're going to probably find out that your child has deficits across a lot of different areas, and so you'll want to think about how much time you're going to commit to actually working on these things. And if you have a little bit of time, you're going to be more selective in what you're choosing. So you need to also think about what your priorities are for your child. So what are the main things that you feel like would make his life better, or the whole family's life function in a better way? And then if you have key things like that, like maybe toilet training is a real problem, then that might be one of the key ones. If he can't communicate his basic needs, then that might be one of them, that kind of stuff. But in addition to that, keep in mind that there's also some skills that are going to be pivotal skills that if you teach them, you're going to be able to go so much further with them. And one of those is imitation skills.
Okay.
So if your child can't already imitate both verbally and gross motor actions, then that's going to hold him up a little bit from learning other skills. So for example, as we're teaching language concepts, we're going to have him repeat the things we say in lots of different situations. If he can't repeat us yet, that's verbal imitation, then that's one of the key things you need to be working on right away. If your child is not even close to being able to imitate something verbally, then there's other things you can do too, like other ways of communicating, like through pecs or whatever. But try to find immediately a way for them to communicate their basic needs and wants. That is absolutely necessary if they're not doing that.
And in all ways of communicating, you know, even if it's a child who has no sounds, they're making no utterances whatsoever, we're still going to need imitation, because if we're going to do the pecs, they're going to have to imitate pointing to things to be able to understand.
So there's your verbal imitation, which you can't really make a child verbally imitate something. You can try, but they just might not, and you can't make their mouth move. So then you go to some other system for them to communicate through pecs or something. But then you're going to now have to teach them gross motor imitation, which would be like, you know, following different actions. And so once they can do those things, that's really nice, because now when we're teaching all sorts of other skills, whether it be motor skills, you can do it through imitation, play skills through imitation. You know, getting them to learn their language, they're going to imitate what you're supposed to say vocally and things like that. So imitation's a huge pivotal skill that if they don't have that, then that's a definite must.
I'm going to guess that compliance is going to be a huge pivotal skill as well.
The other pivotal skill is compliance, So
I feel like I won the lottery. I got it right.
So if they don't even like follow a simple instruction, or can't, won't come and sit down with you when you ask them to or whatever, and they're kind of all over the place, then compliance is one of the things you're going to need to work on as well. And it's important that in the beginning, when you're starting, you need to keep things really fun. So when you're first starting out, they're not really used to all these demands being placed on them. This is a new thing for them.
Right.
It's like we're starting therapy, and when we start it, it's very intensive. And in order to actually teach your child something, you don't just kind of sit around and wait. You know, you got to get in there and do it. And so what you're ultimately ending up doing is putting a lot of demands on your child, because you're asking them things and to do things. And you might try to make it as fun as you can and maybe let them take the lead in certain situations so that they're very motivated and stuff, but still, no matter what, that demand is present. And there can be a bit of a protest against that because it's all new. So make sure you have strong reinforcers when you first start. And make sure that you spend time just playing with the child for a little while with the reinforcers present, and making it fun and making them want to kind of be with you and want to learn. And when you're first starting, you need to evaluate what are the barriers to the child's learning. Because, for example, some kids have major, severe, challenging behavior. Like if they're headbanging or something, then the idea that you're going to sit down with them and teach them all these things is probably not very good idea at the moment. Like headbanging once in a while, maybe no big deal if it's kind of a light headbang, but if they're doing it a lot and it's hard and there's a chance of any injury, then that's a big deal. And so sometimes we don't even work on any skills until we deal with the challenging behavior first.
Yeah, I could just hear my grandmother saying, you're putting the cart before the horse.
Yeah.
Right? Because so many times as a parent, if we make our wish list of what do we, I want my child to speak, I want my child to do this, I want me to do that, and it doesn't matter whether we're talking about a 3-year-old or you're talking about a 16-year-old. If you come and say, I've got a teenager and I want my child to be able to do long division, my teenage child. Great, but if you don't have that compliance that she was just talking about, or you've got some other behavior that is so challenging that it's...
like aggression or something.
Yeah, your child is having anger issues that are so over the top that you're afraid that they're going to hurt themselves or hurt you, you're not going to get to the long division today.
Yeah.
You really got to prioritize and look at that and go, this is the piece of the puzzle that has to come first. We got to get this under control, and we have to gain the compliance, and then when you're able to do the long division, it's not going to be this battle. It'll be okay, and your child you'll have trust between the two of you, and they'll be able to do that much easier.
Yeah, and the type of challenging behavior we're just talking about, it sounds very severe. It's aggression or self-injury, but some kids engage in such high levels of stereotypy that they can't even learn anything anyways because they're not attending. So like maybe a child who does like vocal stereotypy where they're just making noises, whatever, or something out of the corner of their eyes maybe or something. There's no chance that when you're trying to get them to look at you and do something that they're even attending to you, you know what I mean? So that's just going to decrease their attending. So we have to find out if there's any major barriers like that, and that needs to be a big focus of treatment. Doesn't mean you can't work on other things. It just means make that one of the biggest focuses of what you're working on until you get it under control.
And I should say that in our next hour, when we have Dr. Tarbox here, we're going to be talking about how we get those kinds of behaviors under control very specifically, about how those repetitive behaviors that seem to be automatically reinforced, what the research is on it, and what the really proven techniques are of getting those kind of behaviors under control. But I think it's just so key that we're talking about this is how we start, this is how we progress. Because I think that's really, really hard. I will tell you that when I couldn't wait, once I found out about ABA and how effective it was, and I found out that we were going to get funding for it, I could not wait until we started. And there's a little bit of a lag time. You have to fill out your paperwork, and you got to wait, you know. And then finally, that first therapist came to the door. And I was like, hallelujah, because my whole life is going to change, right? And it was a real step back for me because they said, we have to get a whole bunch of things under control before we start doing all the things that you're thinking of. Because I thought he was going to be speaking in the first week and we were going to be like, you know, woohoo, right? I mean, I did. And I had seen all the videos with the table and I was like, I can't wait to see how they're going to get him to sit in a chair because my child couldn't. He wouldn't. Yeah. He had to have vests on.
That's where you have to start. If they can't even sit down, you have to start there.
Well, and they couldn't even start there is my point.
Yeah.
And honestly, I mean, I shudder to tell you because you'll think, oh no, I couldn't possibly make it through this. But it was almost 3 months that they worked on compliance and eye contact. 3 months in the beginning where they worked on those two things, and I kept on saying, when are we going to work on other stuff? When are we going to work on other stuff? But the truth is...
I think I remember you saying they worked a lot on, like, rapport building, too.
Oh,
and just kind of playing with him and making it fun.
Completely.
Yeah.
Because my child did not have those skills. He didn't have the skills to sit down and play with somebody. He didn't have the skills to imitate somebody. There was no eye contact that was happening. He wasn't interested in anybody else. And I was hemming and hawing and standing with one, hand on my hip going, we're not moving fast enough. But I'll tell you, it was almost 3 months later, and they, we ordered a table, a specific table, and they got the chair and they got the table, and my child came over and sat down, and they started running programs, and he was the happiest little camper. And if we had not taken that time in, I don't think we would have gotten where we got.
You might have gotten aggression and all sorts of things, protesting to try to get out of it.
I know he would have. And he was banging his head in those first couple of weeks and throwing things at the therapist. I mean, I always look at Ryan Bergstrom to see on his forehead. I know he's got a scar from where my child hit him with a geotrack, a railroad track thing. He just whacked him one good. Those blessed therapists who took the time. And that was what my individual child needed. Every child is not going to need that, but it's important that you meet the child where they are and do the precursors so that you can. And he flew
once they got it going.
Oh my goodness, he was mastering programs in a day. It was amazing what he could do once they got the compliance. But I had watched him for 6 months go to an early start program where they couldn't even get him to make the sign for a cookie. That's what they worked on for 6 months, and they couldn't get him to do it because he was screaming and throwing himself on the floor, and my husband and I would sit there and cry. Like, what are you going to do? But this is what works. So
wow.
Make sure that you get those things in place, and it will be worth the investment. It's about investing the time.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else that we should be mindful of?
The last thing I would just say is we already kind of talked about, going through a progression, and the progression is going to be age-based, it's going to be level-based, and then within each thing, you got to think about if there's any prerequisites.
Okay.
But a lot of times prerequisites are taken care of if you're starting at a younger age or at an earlier level. But whatever you're working on, just kind of think about, okay, here's the skill I'm trying to teach. In order for someone to do this, what other things do they need to be able to do first?
Yeah.
Just logically think that way about everything.
And it's so incredible to have you here, to have you as an expert here and explaining this to us, because the truth of the matter is that she's given you all of this in the skills program. That if you choose to go with the skills program, it's all there for you. That you go into a lesson, it will tell you what the prerequisites are. You don't have to go research it anywhere. It will tell you the age level. It will tell you the skill level on the lesson. All of those things are there for you in the skills program, so that you don't have to guess and you don't have to get out another device to be Googling something on a separate device than the one that you're working on.
Yeah, and the assessment is linked and everything like that. So
it's really incredible the work that you did and that you oversaw to make that happen. And I know that the original idea was for you to do that for therapists, so that therapists could use it and have access to things that much quicker, but that you kept a mind on, if there is a parent someplace who doesn't have access, we want them to be able to understand it as well.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful piece of work that you've done.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
It is a beautiful piece of work. And I encourage all of you.
And lots of people at CARD contributed.
Absolutely.
Lots, probably an army.
Absolutely. But you led that team, and it's a beautiful piece of work. And I want to encourage people, you should go and check it out and see the ways that it can be useful to you in your home. Go to skillsforautism.com. Any last words on where we start and how we start?
I think that sums it up for now.
Okay. Make sure that you have a good assessment, though, so you don't just start because you take the risk of starting in the wrong place and leading to frustration. Make sure that you are being mindful of, when you're teaching a skill, if your child has all the prerequisites, or you will be frustrated. Both those things are good investments. We thank you so much for being here and always being an awesome resource for us. And if you guys have any questions for Dr. Najdowski, you can send those in. She's here with us on Thursdays on a regular basis, helping us to get to that real progress. It's amazing.
Thank you, Shannon.
Thank you. All right, we are going to take a break and go to the A Word. This is that amazing ongoing documentary being made by the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. And it follows Jack Riley, a little boy who was diagnosed with autism at the age of 2. And in real life, Jack Riley is 5 years old and going to school now and doing so well. But we're journeying back to the very beginning. This is like week 2 of when he had started therapy, and we're seeing what it's like in the beginning and how they're building rapport and getting to the point where they can get that compliance, they can get that eye contact. You should know that Jack Riley is his entire case is in skills. His therapist, his entire team, and his parents use skills to be able to deliver these things to him as well. Just exactly what we've been talking about. So take a look. This is the A Word.
Where's Jack Riley? I don't know. All I see are his little feet. Where'd he go? Where is he? Where is he? Oh, I found him. I found him. I found his little face. There's Jack Riley.
So this is visual stimming. So there's basically no particular function for it. It's just automatic to him.
Hey, let's go find something better to play. Do you want to play with Legos? Say open. Ben, yeah. Open.
So we just redirect it so that it doesn't become just a habit later.
Okay, let's do some talking. Say ba. Good job. Say ga. Good job. There you go, buddy.
We're moving along programs quite quickly, more than we anticipated. This is the Acotics program we started with him.
Say ba. Say pa. Say say go. Good job. Say ya ya. Say ya ya. Cha
Try again. Say ya. That's close. Say ya. Say ya. Almost, buddy.
To get him to begin talking, he needed to start with the basics. Every step is broken down to make the end goal manageable. The first step is making simple sounds. The idea is that once he has the sounds, he will be able to mix them together to enunciate words. Words give power. They are used to label, acquire, inquire. The end goal is to have these words come together to create sentences, to create conversation. Say what he wants, what he thinks, what he feels.
Say ya. Say it louder, okay? Say ya. And when you get your Lego, say ya. Nope. Say ya. Yeah, there you go. That's close, honey. Say E. Good job. Say T. Good. Very good. There you go. So these are just a list of the sounds that he makes or the words that he's trying to say.
Can you say basketball? And even his ball is better now. It used to be ga consistently, and he says ba.
He said ball today, yeah.
Spaghetti. One version of it. You see, like spaghetti.
What's that? Say moon. Yeah, that's the moon. That's right. And his spontaneous language has increased just 1 week of therapy. Hey, Jack Riley. Come here. Come look at my book. Or you want to look at my guitar? You look at my guitar? It's right here. I'm on it. Look. Tar. Good job. Hip hop. Hip hop. Jam. What's up, buddy? What should we play now? See you soon. See you soon. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Welcome back. That is the A Word, and we want to encourage you to watch this series on their very own YouTube channel, and in that way you can do it. I love to watch them every week here, take one episode and kind of, for lack of a better phrase, armchair quarterback it and show you some of the different things. I guess color commentary. That's what I want to do, is the color commentary of what it is that you see. But you do have access to the full series on your own, completely for free. You can go to their YouTube page and cycle through and see the different times that they were working on different lessons. But I especially love these early ones because there's so much new that's being introduced, and they go through some of the jargon and show you exactly what it is that they're doing. At this point, Jack Riley's 2 weeks in, and you can see the difference between his program and my son's program, because my son was doing the things that Jack Riley is doing 3 months later. Now, this is a great illustration of what happens when you wait. I talk to you all the time about early intervention and how important it is to catch autism and start early intensive behavioral intervention as soon as you possibly can. So my son was diagnosed with autism at the age of 2.5, and we started the whole process. We didn't know about ABA, but about 3 months later we started the process for ABA, and it took about another 3 months before we could actually start. So it was about 2 weeks after his 3rd birthday. And by that point, he had all of that time in which he had a bunch of learned behaviors, and he was that much further behind. So we had to take the first 3 months with and this is not going to be the case for every 3-year-old, right? But for my son, we had to take the first 3 months and really core work on that eye contact and that compliance and rapport with the therapist so that he could, and a couple of play skills so that he could play with them and interact with them. Now, Jack Riley diagnosed instead of at 2.5 at 2. So by the time he was 2.5, which was the point that my son was diagnosed, Jack Riley was already getting therapy. So they didn't have to take 3 months with him to work on compliance. They had to, they're working on it as they go along, but he's he's not as far behind as my son was because they caught it earlier. Now imagine every single day earlier that you can push back. There's fewer things that you have to work on to get caught up. And the first thing is getting the child ready to learn, and then it's about getting the child caught up, right? So this is why it is so important. Now, we never advocate, and I'm not trying to compare Jem and Jack Riley at all, just comparing starting at different times and what the trajectory can be. But there is no guarantee of where a child will get progress-wise, except that we know that statistically, the earlier we start, the better the potential of the outcome, right? So I love that Jack Riley is able to start so early, so that at 2.5, he's already realizing, and getting that opportunity to work on a program like a COEX. Imagine if we could start that with somebody who isn't yet 2. I know that's hard, and it's really hard to get doctors to diagnose before the age of 2, but it's not impossible. It is being done on a fairly regular basis now. So if you know somebody who has a concern about a child in their life, I hope you're urging them and telling them about all the hopeful things. And I hope that you point to the A word and say, hey, take a look at this, and take a look at, because people will poo-poo and say, oh, they're just a little behind. Give them a chance and they'll catch up on their own. Well, I guess that works for some people, but why would we risk it? Why would we risk it, right? So absolutely watch this series, The A Word. And, they have their own Facebook page, and you have an opportunity to interact with the family that you can write in. They are lovely about they both will post things from time to time, and they share things, and they will get back to people. They absolutely love it when they hear from families about what they're enjoying watching and how you relate to it. So I encourage you to reach out and check them out on their Facebook page as well. We've had the benefit of having them in the show before. We'll continue to do that at some point. And one of the more recent episodes of the A Word, Autism Live and the A Word went off to the LA Zoo together. So it was a play date. My son, Jem, who was 10, and Jack Riley, who was 5, went off to the zoo together, and it was so cute. I can't believe we haven't had another play date. But on this particular play date, we brought cameras too. It was awesome, absolutely awesome. So if you want to see my kid and Jack Riley interacting, that is also on their YouTube page for the A Word. We're going to take a break, and we're going to be back to talk about funding. Stick with us.
Hi guys, welcome back to Smarty. It's January and a whole new year has gone by. To commemorate that, Autism Live and Smarty have decided to give you a template to make your very own time capsule. The materials you'll be needing are glue, a jar, photos, keepsakes, pen, and a template you can print from facebook.com/autismlive. Here's the template that I printed out from our Facebook page. Depending on the skill of your child, they can do this independently, or you're going to help them fill out all the questions. Once you have finished filling out the time capsule sheet, I've left 2 spaces on the top, one for a school photo, one for a family photo. Feel free to glue an image there. Now that I've glued the photos onto my sheet, now I'm going to grab my jar and start filling it up with all the things I would want to remember from the year that just passed. I would say include photos, mementos, toys, things that are going to be really important to you at this time and moment that you'll be excited to see later in the future. Once you're done filling up your jar with all the things that were important to you for the year 2013, you're going to want to seal it up. And it's up to you for how long you want to keep it locked up. Time capsules are a great way to remember where you have been and where you're going. So I hope you really enjoy this activity, and until next time, craft on, guys.
Can you see me flying by your side?
Welcome back to Autism Live. I promised that we would get an opportunity to talk a little bit about funding. You know, it's so interesting to me how much of funding is about what your mindset is and your willingness to take action. Now, I don't say that lightly because I know that all of you who are watching have different financial situations that are going on, and some of them are very real and very dire. And I'm not suggesting that you're in financially dire situations because your mindset was wrong, okay? I don't want that to be misconstrued. But your ability to fund treatment for autism appears to be directly related to a willingness to say, I'm going to do whatever it takes. Because I don't think there's any scientific other way to explain it. It's just sort of something magical happens. And I want to give you an example, and we'll see how well of an example it is. My son right now is studying all about the colonies and the 13 colonies and how they were settled. And we've been having lots of conversations in my home about how that happened and why it happened and why did people leave Europe and why did they get into rickety boats and cross the Atlantic in what had to have been the most dire circumstances. I mean, you know, to me, it just seems like complete craziness to get on a boat and say, I'm going to go someplace that I can't look at a picture of, and there's nothing that's going to be there when I get there. There's not going to be a grocery store. It boggles my mind. And I like to think of myself as having an adventuresome soul, but I guess not, right? How on earth, and we had to sit there the other day and come up with some real things why people would be so motivated to leave and come to someplace else that they weren't really sure about. And you know, I gotta say that funding for autism is a lot the same way that it seems overwhelming. Like when you look at the bottom line of what early intensive behavioral intervention is gonna cost across 2 years, let alone 4 or more years, I couldn't even look at that. I would not look at that because it's so overwhelming. It's so overwhelming, and the truth of the matter is that there is no one that I know who could just write a check for it. I'm sure that there is a very small percentage of people on the earth, and if you are one of those people, bless you, and I'm going to ask you to pay it forward when you have the opportunity to. But most of us, there is absolutely no earthly way that we could afford that. So what do? We stay home and say, yeah, we're not going to do it? We could, and I know people who have. I really early on was so frightened. I insisted on not knowing the numbers, but I was frightened at what I thought the numbers were. And can I tell you, I thought that they were the numbers that I had in my head that were overwhelming, I was thinking $30,000. And that was so frightening to me that I was physically ill about it, when in fact the number was probably closer to $330,000 worth of therapy that my son was going to need, much closer to that number. That would have put me over the edge, right? But other people said to me, don't pay attention to that. Start taking action on where can you get money from? What are the possibilities? Make lists. And there are lots of funding possibilities that are out there. We've talked before about start with your insurance and work your way down. But there are lots of different funding sources out there. You're going to have to piecemeal it together in most circumstances. You're not going to get all the funding in one place. I know we all want it to be, yay, insurance is paying for ABA therapy. Oh, how fabulous. Except that for even those of you who have that wonderful, wonderful resource, and not all of you do, but for those of you who do, you went, oh, this is so fabulous. And then you found out that you were going to have to pay $5,000 in deductibles this year. Right? But that is not as overwhelming as you think because there are other resources available for that. So you really have to make a list for yourself about what do you have available to you, what do you know about, and where are you going to search for more information. Right now, you still have today and tomorrow to apply for a grant from Autism Care and Treatment Today. Go to act-today.org. Now, they have 4 different times in the year when you can apply for a grant, and they will give up to $5,000 for what you need. Now, you might need $5,000 to cover your deductible or your copay. Well, that you can ask for a grant for that amount of money. $5,000 for that. You will have to fill out a lot of paperwork, as we talked about with Nancy Allspaw Jackson yesterday, but it's possible that you can do that. For someone else, it might be that they need $5,000 to go and have a different assessment done, or they want less than $5,000 because they want to be able to subscribe to skills for the next year. After everything we just talked about with Dr. Najdowski, they're saying, you know, I really want to be able to have access to this, and you can. Grants have been given, many grants have been given for skills. Maybe you just want to get training through IBT. Maybe you need some equipment for your child because your child needs a fence because they're running away. You can see that there are lots of different sources that are out there that will fund different kinds of things. There are some grant programs who will only fund things that are medical in nature. There are other grant programs who will only fund things that are educationally related. Right? There are other fund programs that only fund technology, like iPads. So use your resources well. If you know that your insurance company is going to pay for X amount of ABA, hit them with that bill. Find somebody like Act Today who will pay for the copay part of it. Go to the people who give grants for iPads and have them do the technology. It's like sewing a quilt together. But when I tell you that you will not be the first person or the 100th person or the 1,000th person who has done it, I'm not lying to you. So many parents over the last 30 years have found the way. Just like those early settlers who believed and said, I'm going to get on that rickety boat and I'm going to cross that ocean because I believe there's something better on the other side. I know I'm going to meet some hardship on the way, but when I get there, I have a belief. I don't know how they did it, but clearly they did, because so many of us are here in the United States and we wouldn't have been otherwise. Ancestors of mine got on that boat. I have nothing but respect for them, you know, and I'm telling you that many others have gotten on the funding for autism boat before you, and they've made it to the other side. So I hope that inspires you to take action today. I promised you that there was something you could do today. Today and tomorrow, you still have the ability to apply for a grant from Autism Care and Treatment Today, act-today.org. There are other grants, and we're going to be featuring them. I'm working on a blog right now just on funding sources to be able to share that with you. But get her done. You will save yourself so much money, and you will save your stomach lining, and you might save your family, and you will certainly help your child to make progress when you take this seriously. You can do it. I guarantee you can. All right, let's take a break, and we're going to come back with more Autism Live after these messages.
Nick was diagnosed with autism in 1994 at the age of 4. He received 5 years of therapy from CARD that eventually faded out. Nick recovered from autism in 2001.
The song I'm about to perform is by the Red Hot Chili Peppers. CARD helped many patients, myself, to recover to this level now.
Cheryl and Mike's son, Jack Riley, was diagnosed with autism in 2010 at age 2. He's been receiving therapy from CARD for a year and a half. Today, Cheryl, Mike, and Nick meet for the first time.
I'm curious as to what you remember.
I certainly remember pretty long sessions, and I'd be frustrated if I would make mistakes. I mean, I remember one time I had to count a row of 6 blocks, kept messing up. That was really difficult.
No.
I need it. I need it.
At what point do you recall hearing the word autism?
I was able to figure out what I was going through without anybody having to tell me.
Our concern is if it's a big secret to hide. I don't know what we can say.
No one ever told you, you just discerned
But the
it?
reason I'm comfortable talking about this is because I felt it. In therapy, I certainly began questioning why people reacted as they did based on what I said and did, particularly because of difficulties I was facing in school. It got to a point where I wanted to understand why it was. I entered while still going through therapy and still showing significant signs of the mental condition. Even after I'd improved to a significant extent, there were those who still gave me a hard time for it.
Did it hurt your feelings when you were in school, the way that kids...
Oh, absolutely, because it was bullying, it was harassment.
That scares us.
They called me names. I was basically, when it came to sports and PE, I was usually the last kid chosen.
Did teachers intervene?
Fortunately, not really. I mean, it was just so hard for me to talk about it because of how ashamed I felt. Certainly the first few years of elementary school, I don't think I really had the most supportive teachers. I mean, I remember my mom told me how my first grade teacher once said that she thought I had no chance of getting anywhere. And going away to college and out of state and being the only person from my old school district has made a difference. It's just really improved my social life tremendously because I got to be me, because with nobody knowing about my past, I wasn't faced with these misconceptions and prejudgments.
Do you tell people, new people that you meet?
No, that's not the first thing I will ever
No, I would
tell
hope it's not the
and
first
you know
thing,
what? In most cases, I never do, because while it's a part of my past, it doesn't define who I am. I mean, just thinking back to the very beginning, pretty much each episode, autism, what, not who.
I want to tell you right now, though, I'm so impressed with you.
Likewise.
I want you to know that.
Likewise. I mean, your son really inspires me just as much because I'll tell you anytime.
I adore him, but I'd be lying if I said it wasn't challenging.
I mean,
it's cost me the stuff that like career things, goals. I don't care about those anymore. I work at night. I'm tending bar. Not that I'm too good for that. I'm just saying that's what I do. I want him to have a chance.
Right.
And you inspire me now.
Thank you. The feeling goes both ways. The feeling's mutual.
Before you leave today, we would like you to meet Jack.
I would love to.
This is Nick. Hi, Nick.
Hey, Jack Riley.
All right, should we try this? I'm gonna try to take a picture of all of you. 1, 2, and 3.
Jack Riley, you rock.
Welcome back to Autism Live. We're so thrilled that we have with us in the studio Dr. Jonathan Tarbox. He is the head of research and development at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders and the director of the Autism Research Group. Amazing, amazing things that you do. We're so thrilled and lucky that we get to have you on Thursdays.
It's always a pleasure.
Well, and we have lots of questions that have come in from parents, but I promised that one of the things that we were going to talk about is behaviors that prevent our children from being able to access other things. Sometimes it's those repetitive and restrictive behaviors, those things that a lot of times we end up saying are automatically reinforcing. So maybe we should start with a brief discussion about what's meant by automatically reinforcing.
Sure. Okay. So automatically reinforcing behaviors are behaviors that you do because they produce their own satisfaction or their own reinforcement. So self-stimulatory is sort of the more common, less technical term.
Or people say stimming.
Stimming, right, which is short for self-stimulatory. Right.
Right.
Yeah, it's sort of the slang term.
Yes.
But basically it just means behaviors that produce their own satisfaction or their own reinforcement. Everybody does them. It's totally normal to do them. The only thing that makes them challenging for people on the spectrum is the particular way in which they do them or the amount of time they spend doing them. So for example, what do you and I do that produces its own satisfaction? We might read a novel, right? Lay on the couch and read a book. We might watch TV, right? No one's standing next to the TV saying, good job, while you watch TV, right?
Right.
You don't get any external reward from watching TV. It just feels good. You like it, it makes you feel better, you do it, okay? When you have a mosquito bite, you might scratch it, right? A massage just feels good, right? Eating food just feels good, right? It produces its own satisfaction. So there's tons of automatically reinforced behaviors that are completely fine and totally normal and not a problem at all. When it becomes problematic for folks on the spectrum is when, like I said, when the particular form of the behavior is so different or so aberrant that it makes the child really stand out, right? So.
Well, and not only that, I'm thinking there are some things that if a child is doing, like flapping hands, then how are we going to get to handwriting?
Right, exactly.
How would we ever? And this is a tough subject for a lot of people, because at some point parents think, well, this is what calms him down, or this is what soothes him, and I hate to take that away.
Right.
But and there's always a decision that has to be made of, are we going to work on this behavior?
Right.
But when it's preventing the child, when the child is doing this and looking down doing this, so they're not going to make eye contact with a friend, they're not going to play with another kid in the sandbox, they're not going to learn handwriting, then do we make the decision and say we're going to take this behavior on?
Right. And like I always try to point out on your show, the standards that we use for kids on the spectrum really should be about the same as the standards we use for anybody else, which is, for example, if you have a typically developing kid who has some kind of habit that's automatically reinforced that they want to do constantly, do you let them do it constantly just because it makes them happy? No, right? So the classic example is video games. Most typically developing kids, if you let them play video games as much as they want, it would probably be 10 hours a day, right? Because it's fun, it feels good, why not, right? They don't know that that's not the best thing for them, or even if they do know, they don't care. That's what they want to do, right?
That's what they want to do.
So what do you do with a typically developing kid who wants to play video games too much? You might make a goal for what seems like a reasonable amount of video game time, and that's how much they get each day, as long as they're, a good citizen of the family for that day. Let's say if you're polite and respectful to your parents, you get video games at the end of the day for whatever your family thinks is reasonable, half an hour, an hour. Every family's different. Same thing for kids on the spectrum. If they want to engage in repetitive behavior that feels good, you don't have to completely take that away, and you don't have to say, no, you don't get the thing that makes you happy. It's just you have to ask yourself questions like, well, what's a reasonable amount of time you can spend doing that? So if right now your child is spending about 3 hours a day rocking and hand flapping, you have to ask yourself, is that a reasonable amount of time? Or like you said, are there other things that's preventing your child from doing, like socializing or like engaging in other more appropriate leisure skills? That doesn't mean your child can't then also go to his bedroom at the end of the day and rock and engage in hand flapping for a while. Why not? That's his time, right? His personal time. But when you're trying to do other things like educational or social activities, if it's interfering in those, then that's sort of a common sense, reasonable standard for when and where you might want to decrease that behavior.
Okay. Now, for some of our kids, they've got a whole host of different behaviors.
Sure.
That they've got vocal stereotypy going on, where they're making all kinds of noises. They got some kind of gesture going on. They got a bunch of different things. So I wonder if you could say a little bit about how do we decide what to start with first, or do we take them all on together? Are they all equal and even? How do we prioritize?
Right. So that's kind of a tough one, right? And it's going to totally depend on the child. It's going to depend on how much help you have, right? So if your child is in an ABA program, let's say 20 to 40 hours a week of one-to-one, that's their job, is to figure this stuff out, right? It's not your job. You should be involved in the entire process of planning and goals and all of that stuff, but it's their job to do it. And they have time to do it, set aside to do that. And so at that point, you would kind of prioritize. You might say, well, which ones are interfering with learning during the ABA therapy the most? And let's try to decrease those and increase the amount of time spent paying attention to learning or teaching situations, right? So that would be the first priority. And usually an ABA provider will pick maybe 2 or 3 different forms of stereotypy and try to decrease those. But for a parent, it might be quite a different story altogether. I mean, you might say, well, it's not so much during teaching time, it's during like after school time or evening time, or hanging out with the family on weekend days.
That's kind of when they wind down.
Right? Yeah, exactly. And so again, you might ask yourself, what's a reasonable amount of time that I should let my child engage in this stereotypy? And then outside of that, what else can I get my child to do? And the key with any behavior, if you want to change a person's behavior and get them to do something less, the key is to give them something else to do that's meaningful, productive, and produces its own satisfaction, right? Or produces some kind of meaningful satisfaction or outcome to the individual. So if it's a child with autism engaging in automatically reinforced stereotypy, you better give them something else to do with their time instead of that that's meaningful.
Okay, but it's got to be meaningful to them.
Meaningful to the child, not meaningful to you necessarily.
And therein lies the rub, right? Because that can be
absolutely.
a very difficult thing to figure out.
Right.
Okay, so we are going to take a short break, and you guys at home can be writing in questions. You know that Dr. Tarbox can never give child-specific advice, but if there's a behavior that you particularly have a question about, we can talk about it in general, and it can help to lead to you getting help and support in other areas. So now's a great time to be writing in if you have questions. But we're going to come back and talk about some examples maybe of how you take on and what it looks like when you've found the behavior that you say, we want to phase this behavior out, and an example of how you give something meaningful to the child. So stick with us.
Hello, activists. Let's talk about step 7. Recognize your gifts and abilities. Whatever gifts and abilities you had before autism entered your life, you have them now. And I bet you've developed some that you didn't even know you had. Those gifts and abilities are going to help you in your journey of parenting a child with autism spectrum disorders. Maybe you're a born researcher, teacher, negotiator, or organizer. Well, you're going to need all of those talents. And you could find a whole new calling. That's what happened to me. If you had told me 20 years ago that I was going to leave behind a career as a television producer to work as an autism advocate and activist, I would have said, you're nuts. If you don't think you have any special gifts or abilities, ask someone who loves you. They'll tell you what they are. I guarantee you, you have them. What's your special gift? Find it, use it, for yourself, for your child, for the good of all concerned. Until next time, keep the faith.
Welcome back to Autism Live. We are here right now with Dr. Jonathan Tarbox, and he is truly an expert in the field of autism, has been working with children on the autism spectrum for quite a while now. He's the head of research and development at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders and the director of the Autism Research Group. So a great person to go to with these questions. I was just saying during the break, my goodness, I have so many questions because I feel like we've really come across the meat of what we want to know about. When a child or someone else is engaging in behaviors that are restrictive and or repetitive in nature, and they're preventing that person from being able to contact things that we want them to contact, what we do about it. Now, you were saying that we don't necessarily have to have this behavior go away, that we can have them, give them an opportunity, have some time in which they can engage in this behavior when it's not interfering with other things. We've had Temple Grandin on the show before talking about the fact that she loved compulsively to spin this metal plate on the end of her bed. And her mother, who was a brave and brilliant woman from another time, knew enough to be able to say to her, Temple, you can do that 1 hour a day. You go and you do that in your bedroom, we'll close the door and you can spin that plate, but that's it. The hour's over and then you're done. And, and Temple understood those were the rules. This is how long I can do this. And she still talks about how much she loved spinning that plate. It was a great time. But you were saying that, there are some things that we can do when we've identified a behavior and we've said, this is the behavior that we want to work on. And how do we begin to know? You mentioned being able to find a behavior that takes its place, that's meaningful to that individual.
Right.
Give us an example.
That's a tough one.
It is a tough one.
So in the very simplest cases, there's an alternative behavior that's more socially appropriate, right?
Mm-hmm.
And is more sort of adaptive or positive for the child, and that the kid is going to love. And all you have to do is just sort of show it to them, and they'll do that instead, right?
Okay.
And so during the break, you mentioned something about a kid who does this all the time. Well, give him drums and drumsticks, and now he's playing the drums. Way more appropriate, right? And it turns into a hobby or a musical talent, which is awesome. That's great. And that would be the first thing that you try is what is the kid doing that we want to decrease, and let's find a different behavior that is going to produce similar type of satisfaction to the child. So if it's auditory stimulation, or if it's visual stimulation or tactile stimulation, you identify something else that's socially appropriate, some kind of toy or some kind of activity or some kind of hobby, whatever it is. Arts and crafts, throwing and catching a ball, bouncing on a trampoline, running around in the backyard, whatever, playing catch, whatever it is, but something that's more socially appropriate that produces the same type of sensory stimulation as the inappropriate behavior. And give that to the child and encourage them to do it. Prompt them to do it, praise them, whatever. Show them how to use the new activity, whatever it is. And cross your fingers, okay? And if that works, great. That's
what
really
happens
lucky.
when that becomes the obsession?
Well, okay, so then what you want to do is have multiple different activities, right? But even so, like being obsessed with playing the drums is a whole lot better than being obsessed with pounding a table.
That's true.
Right? I mean, it still could be too loud and it still could be annoying, but you could even get an electronic drum set and have earphones, right? So it's not even too loud. And again, you don't want your kid only playing drums 8 hours a day every day, right? But it's still a good step in the right direction.
Well, I'm just thinking at some point the child has to stop playing the drums and go to school and take the math class,
Absolutely. Right?
So they can't do that all the time.
Right.
But like in Temple's case, Temple talked about, she knew she was going to get that hour and she knew that it was not going to be interrupted. So she looked forward to that and eventually would stop obsessing on doing it at other times.
Right, and that's another a great procedure that I actually hadn't heard the Temple Grandin story, but but there is some research on this, and it's called bringing the self-stimulatory or stereotypic behavior under stimulus control, meaning there's specific situations in which the child is allowed to do it and not any other time. So you basically tell the kid, look, under these circumstances, go to town, just go for it as much as you want, okay? But when those circumstances are not in place, that behavior is not going to work. We're going to have to do something different, okay? So there's a lot of different ways to do this. Sometimes some clinicians will use bracelets. So when you're wearing the green bracelet, just go to town, do whatever you want. When you're wearing the red bracelet, it's not going to work. And so as soon as the kid starts to do the behavior, when the red bracelet is on, the parent or the clinician will redirect him to something else and prevent the behavior from occurring. When the green bracelet's on, go for it. Other signals you can use are, being in the bathroom by yourself. When you're in the bathroom by yourself, go to town. Or being in your bedroom by yourself, go for it. Or a visual schedule of some kind, right, with different icons for different activities, whatever. You get the idea. You have some clear signal to the child that when this signal's in place, do the behavior. And so, in the Temple Grandin case, it's when you're in your bedroom by yourself during this hour, in bed, go for it.
Yeah.
But that's the only time.
Well, and I'm imagining that being very specific and upholding whatever it is that you put into place, because when Temple talks about it, I've not gotten to meet Temple's mother, and I really hope to soon, but I can just imagine the way she talks about it. Eustacia was like, this is when it's happening and this is when it's not happening, and there was no wiggle room in that.
Right.
And I, in that respect, Eustacia is a much better parent than I am, because with me, I'm like, well, it's Tuesday and it's 4 o'clock and you've been really good. So, and I get a little muddy with things, right? Or, special circumstances.
Yeah. But if you want to make it easiest for your child to understand and to discriminate when to do the behavior and not do the behavior, you got to be consistent, right? Which is what you're saying. The clearer and more consistent you are, the easier it will be for your child to let go of that obsessing and to just say, okay, I know when it's going to happen and I know when it's not. And if they really believe that, and the only way they can believe that is from you following through. But if they really believe that, it'll be easier for them to let go of obsessing about it constantly.
Okay. Now, ideally, you would work on this with a team. That you would have an ABA team, and they would be helping you to do this, because I imagine that there's some parents out there who don't have a team. Absolutely. So what would you do if you're the parent and you don't have the ABA team? What kind of reinforcements would you pull in from a family, or what would be your attack plan?
Well, probably any time that you're going to put together a plan for yourself to do with your child, you've got to be realistic about your resources in terms of time, right? And so probably before you do anything else, you have to sit down and ask yourself, and you got to be honest with yourself, how much time am I committed to spending on this specific problem? And you got to be realistic. You can't overestimate that, because then not following through is going to make you feel bad because you didn't really do what you said you were going to do, and it's not going to work anyways. So be realistic. Is it 10 minutes a day? Fine, right? 15 minutes a day. Maybe think of it as homework. How much time would you spend helping your kid with homework per day, right? Maybe an hour a day, whatever it is, but be realistic. Maybe you're going to get the grandma to help. Maybe it's going to be the nanny. Maybe dad's going to help. Whatever it's going to be, but be realistic about your resources and make a schedule. And once you have that schedule, you say, okay, 15 minutes a day or an hour a day, but only on Saturdays and Sundays, whatever it is, then you can start to plan, what are we actually going to get done in that 15 minutes? Or what are we actually going to get done in that hour? And it doesn't really require anybody else. It can be just you and your child at first, okay? But don't forget, for generalization, you are going to need to bring other people in and do it at different times of day and in different rooms and in different settings in order to teach your child that this is a skill, this new habit or this new skill they've learned is something that they can apply across across their lives, not just during 10 minutes of stim time or whatever with mom.
Okay, so which brings me to my next thing, that sometimes, you know, maybe they're working on this at school, or you've got therapists who are working on this at home, and we hear this a lot from our families. They'll write in and say, well, my child is able to keep this together at school. We don't have the vocal stereotypy at school. But then they come home and forget it. It's Katie bar the door.
Right.
Or, you know, they're great with the therapists leave, and it's mom and dad, and suddenly, you know, we're back to square one.
Right.
What do we do when it's that? How can we, as parents, get on that and change that equation around?
Okay, so the basic way that we look at the world in ABA is the person does what they're doing because of how their environment is structured, okay? And that's it, right? And so the reason why your child behaves the way they do during your child's ABA therapy is because of what the ABA therapist does.
Yeah.
Period.
Not a big mystery.
No, it's not. It's very straightforward, and yet, you know, we try to overcomplicate things by making up a bunch of explanations like, oh, well, my kid respects them more than me, or my kid gets more frustrated with me than that. Well, you know, fine. All of that could be reasonable, but what it really comes down to is what your ABA therapist does produces your child's behavior with them, right? And that can be a good thing or a bad thing, right? So if your child's tantruming all the time with your ABA therapist, that means they're doing something that helps your child tantrum all the time, right? Or if your child is really well behaved with your ABA therapist, that means the therapist is doing something that produces that great behavior, helps your child make those great choices. So the very clear implication for you is if you want your child to act like they do with their ABA therapist, if you want them to act that way with you, you need to act like their ABA therapist, right? And that doesn't mean you have to not be a parent. It just means that you need to do the things that the therapist does to produce that change in behavior.
Is it safe to say, though, it's going to take the parent longer to get that working than it does for the therapist, because the therapist comes in and it's a clean slate, whereas the parent, we've done things in the past and have moments in the past that weren't our highest parenting self.
Sure.
I mean, I'm speaking for myself here.
It's possible. It's possible. Or you could say the opposite, too. You could say that because of all the work your child has done with a therapist, it's actually going to be easier for them to learn to do the same thing with you because they've built the foundation, right? So honestly, it could go either way. And worrying about that either way, you can make a justification for why something's good or why it's bad. At the end of the day, it doesn't really make a difference.
It's not
all
really
you
useful.
Can do, it's not useful, right? All you can do is do the best that you can do. Make a commitment to make a behavior change on your part, a behavior change that you're going to do. Make a commitment that you're going to do it for at least 3 days. I'm going to do it for at least 2 weeks, whatever it is. Stick with it. See if it makes a difference.
And ask for the extra support maybe in the beginning so that you're not going it alone, because that's tough.
It's very difficult.
It's tough for me still sometimes when I decide, you know, we I always say there's a new sheriff in town sometimes where we're doing things a different way than we've done it before. When I sort of tighten up things, it's rough, and I have to be in a place where I'm ready.
It's your own child. And I'll tell you what, you know, ABA therapists are no better parents than anybody else. We do the best we can with our kids, but I'll tell you what, it's not any easier. It's much easier when it's someone else's kids. And so you have to give yourself some slack in that sense. But that doesn't mean you can be any less consistent, right? It just means you can have some empathy for yourself and some compassion for yourself. But you still got to be just as consistent.
You still need to do it because it's what's important for your relationship with your child and for your child's growth and progress.
If you want to see your child's behavior change, your behavior has to change. It's that simple.
We have a slide that says that if you want to have anybody else's behavior change, you have to change yours first.
That's really true.
I kind of hate that slide. It's a reality check,
the
and
ultimate
I really don't like
taking
that
of responsibility, right? But that's what we do.
It has to start with me, and that takes energy, but worthwhile. Okay, we have a bunch of questions that we have unrelated to this, but we will still take questions related to this. We're going to take a break and come back more with Dr. Jonathan Tarbox after these messages.
The Institute for Behavioral Training provides courses in applied behavior analysis for the treatment of autism. Access IBT e-learning videos on the move and learn at your own pace.
I'm going to talk a little bit about intensity of
IBT e-learning makes any location your classroom on the go.
So our objectives for today are to really learn what is autism and how is it diagnosed.
Get professional guidance with IBT face-to-face training. IBT face-to-face training courses prepare you to effectively implement ABA-based interventions. Choose between small group and one-to-one instruction.
Earn BCBA supervision hours via one-to-one video conferencing.
So I had a chance to review your BIP today. You know what? It looked really good. You did a good job with it.
IBT, continuing education courses. Earn credit through webinars, conferences, article reviews, and e-learning videos. You can learn more at ibehavioraltraining.com. IBT, 360 degrees of ABA training.
Welcome back to Autism Live. We are here right now with Dr. Jonathan Tarbox. He is the head of the director of the Autism Research Group and the head of research and development for the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. And he has been working with children on the autism spectrum for multiple decades now, and we appreciate.
Not that old.
No, you're not.
I'm just kidding.
And I actually love the story of how you got started in ABA, and I tell it from time to time to remind people, because people say, I only want to have somebody who's really experienced come and work with my child. And can we tell just a little bit about the story that you were a college student?
Yeah, political science major in college, and just saw an ad on the job board in my college for a tutor for a kid with autism. I thought I went, go and check it out, and it was a mom designing the program herself. There were no service providers in the area at all. This was rural southern Vermont. We brought consultants in from out of state that trained us, and looking back, we did a terrible job, but even then, we actually helped the kid a lot. He really made a lot of progress.
And I just want to point out that, you might have somebody come to your door this week who it's their first day doing therapy, but they might become Dr. Jonathan Tarbox, right? You don't know when people start out. And a part of doing ABA, if you're working with a good quality ABA provider, there are always going to be new therapists coming in and training. And
it's part of the process.
I encourage parents to be a part of that process. It's where you're going to find the therapists that you most want to work with, that work well. Every therapist is not going to work well with every child. At the Center for Autism and Related Disorders, they do things called overlaps, where you have your regular therapist who comes and brings a trainee with them. I would learn so much from those sessions. I made sure that I had a video baby camera on for every session, so I would listen, and they would be explaining things to the therapist. I would learn so much.
Absolutely.
And I would get to hear that person interact with my child. And so later on, when schedules were changing, I would know, I want to ask for so-and-so because I really like them and they have rapport with my child. It's a great process to be a part of. You will learn and grow from it. And it's good for your child, too.
It is good.
Because then that generalization thing that you were talking about, they're hearing, the new therapist comes in and doesn't word it exactly the way the other therapist did, and that's good for your child.
Different tone of voice, different facial expression.
Or even expressing it in a different way. They didn't say the SD exactly correctly. Woohoo!
That's good.
Because neither is the checkout at Target.
Right, exactly.
Right? It's really good for your child. So keep that in mind. I mean, you always want to make sure that they're being trained properly and that you're keeping an eye on things.
Yeah.
But it's really good for your child to bring new people in and have them work with your child as part of their training. Very good for everybody and leaves a good legacy too. Okay, moving on though. We had a question that came in, and I believe it's a follow-up to a question from last week that we had. Hi, Shannon and Dr. Tarbox. My son is 3 years and 2 months getting 40 hours of ABA through CARD. My question is, now that he is getting the 40 hours, how much therapy should I be doing? And what should I be doing? FYI, I have 2 other kids. Thank you, and God bless you both for all the help you provide for us desperate parents. Been there and done that, and that's part of why I want to be here, is to pay forward the help that I got from people like yourself, that you helped us so much. So thrilled to be a part of all of that.
Okay, so this is, first of all, congratulations that they have a full program and that they're getting the right treatment at the right age. That's awesome, right?
Yeah, you're
nothing
rocking
could be better. But to answer your question in terms of how much work you can be doing as well, honestly, the best outcomes are achieved when families are the most committed and the most involved. And that's challenging for everybody. Honestly, it's easier for the ABA provider if the parents kind of check out, because we just do our job,
Right.
But it doesn't produce the best outcomes. The best outcomes are when the parents are very seriously, intensively involved. So I always like in early intensive ABA to something like training for your first Olympic performance, okay? So let's say you have one shot to go to the Olympics. You're an Olympic athlete or hopeful, and you've got a few years to train. You've got maybe 3 or 4 years to train, a 3 or 4 year Olympic career. What are you going to do for those 3 or 4 years? Are you going to do the average amount that most people do, or are you going to do the absolute most that you can to produce the best possible outcome and maybe even get a gold medal, right? So it's just like that. Or going to grad school. When you go to get your PhD, you don't do the minimum. You try to get the absolute most that you can out of those 4 years or 5 years that you have, the most intensive learning experience of your life, to have the best possible outcome, right?
Yeah.
So early intensive ABA for kids with autism is the same thing, except it's, unfortunately, the whole family is basically training for the Olympics. So the way that, personally, that I would like to, or the way that I conceptualize it, and my recommendations is, if it's possible, and just have this conversation with yourself, if it's possible, is it possible for you to say to yourself, the next 3 or 4 years are going to be the most challenging years of my life, and I am going to make many sacrifices. And, you know, Olympic athletes, you don't see them eating whatever they want. You don't see them socializing a whole bunch. You don't see them do all the other things that would make a life more full and fulfilling and happy and less stressful. You do see them completely dedicated to this one thing. So is it possible for you to sort of conceptualize your child's treatment a little bit like that? Not to that same level, but kind of like that. Kind of like, maybe it doesn't really matter how much I feel or how I feel too much for the next few years. Maybe it's worth it to put in an unreasonable amount of effort, an unreasonable amount of work, so that I can get the best possible outcomes. Now, that being said, don't go crazy, right? Like, take care of yourself, right? I'm not saying don't have fun by any means, but every waking moment for your child is a learning opportunity, right? There's only two options. Either you're asleep or you're learning something, if you're a human being, okay? So when your child's not asleep, they're learning something. And everything that you do in interacting with your child influences that learning, right? And have fun. Make sure to have fun. And not or. It's not a choice between enjoy life or help your child learn. It's both. It's enjoy life, and while you do that, fit in the maximum number of learning opportunities possible. And so the first thing to do is to ask your child's supervisor, what can I do? What homework can I work on for the next 2 weeks? And how can I embed these learning opportunities into what I do with my child every day?
Yeah. And I think it's great that you have 2 other children, because, as you were saying, it does involve the whole family.
Right.
And you know, the families, we only had 1 child, and so I can't speak with any authority to how difficult it is to manage that with other children, and I freely admit that. But we've had so many people on the show who talk about how they successfully did that, and I've had the opportunity to interview siblings, and they do have some resentment. That I think that's a little bit unavoidable, right? But the ones that have come through it very successfully, and everybody's still close, the siblings talk about how they were involved.
Right, exactly.
How they were, that, you know, that when they were old enough, the parents talked to them about, you know, this is what we're doing and this is why we're doing, and you're part of the team that's going to make the difference with your brother or your sister, and here's how we're going to go about it, and it in no way means that you are less than or less than important, and that how important it was to find some niche for the other children where they got good attention for whatever that niche was.
And I guarantee you that your child's siblings have something that they really care about and they really like doing that would be a great learning opportunity for your child on the spectrum. I guarantee it. Every single family I've ever seen, the older siblings have something they like to do that's a good learning opportunity.
Absolutely.
Right? So whatever sport they like to play, whatever game they like to play, there's a way to fit that into helping your child generalize whatever social skills, whatever language skills, waiting skills, whatever it is. There's an opportunity to put those 2 things together and to have fun with the siblings and involve them as active members of the team.
Yeah, and I as I look back at things, you know, I feel like we did a pretty good job as parents of immersing ourselves in the time when therapists weren't there, and we went out into the world every opportunity that we could. I feel like we did a really good job of that. The thing that if I could do it over again, I would do differently is that I would have included my close friends ever so much more than I did.
Yeah.
I was so worried about what I was doing and if I was doing what was right, and was concerned about that we really didn't involve much of our family and much of our friends, and I would encourage you to do that as well.
That's right.
Encourage those people, have them come and learn what you're doing, so that suddenly when your child is 10 and you're in their homes, it's not a shock to them.
That's right. And frankly, I think most families find that most people are less judgmental than they expect that they're going to be.
Yeah.
Of course, it's natural that you're doing this ABA thing, and it's so intensive and it's so different from how you thought your life would be with your young child, that you are going to think, like, what are people going to think of this?
Yeah.
This looks weird, right?
Yeah.
But generally speaking, I think most people are good. Most people can see you care about your kid, you're dedicated to your kid, and you're doing what it takes to get them better. And yeah, friends and family, for the most part, are going to want to be involved. They'd rather know what's going on and have your cousin, your child's cousin or sibling or neighbor over to hang out, involve them.
And of course, there are exceptions. There are people who are not going to be helpful, who are not going to be supportive, and it doesn't matter whether you find that out on the first day of your child's ABA therapy or on the last day. They weren't going to be supportive. They weren't going to be helpful. I think it's actually better to find that out on the second day, so you can say to yourself, we're not going to be talking to this person for a while, and just kind of, don't make it a big deal, but remove yourself from their negative influence and move on with the people who are part of your team.
Right.
It's just easier to get it over with. Otherwise, you invest so much money and time and effort into getting along with that person, and then later on go, why am I doing that? We've all had that moment. Why am I spending time trying to convince this person when they're not really interested in getting it? And some people won't, and bless them in their ignorance. Send them on their happy. Remember, my phrase always is, other people's opinions of my parenting are none of my business.
That's right.
None of my business.
Not your responsibility. And one other thing too, before I, because I always kind of impart upon parents what an opportunity they have and how much time they could be, it feels like a big responsibility, right? But and it is, and you have a major opportunity to make a major difference for your child by being deeply involved in ABA therapy. And you need to reward yourself. You deserve it, right? Even if you weren't doing a good job, you deserve a reward, right? Just from the stress alone and the challenging nature of parenting a kid on the spectrum, you deserve a reward. But especially if you're putting the time in and you're actively engaged, figure out something you wouldn't normally do for yourself and give it to yourself. I would say at least once a week.
Okay.
Identify one positive reinforcer for yourself and give it to yourself. Carve out some time to give that to yourself. Even if it seems maybe a little unreasonable to other people, you've earned it.
I'm going to try to work that into my life, because I think that that's really super duper important, and I think it's easy for that to get lost.
It's very easy.
When you go all in and you say, I'm all in and priority number one is this, and you're somewhere around number 45.
Right, but you don't need to choose. You can be fully engaged and fully dedicated to your child's treatment and give yourself a little reward too.
Okay. I'm going to work on that. I don't think I did that as often as I needed to.
And
but
don't
I'm
count on someone else to reward you. They're not
that ship's not coming.
Right, you got to do it for yourself.
All right. Okay, we had one other question, and we're almost out of time. But earlier we were talking with Dr. Najdowski about how where do we start?
Right.
I love your phrase about how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? But I was saying the other day, sometimes I don't know which end of the elephant to start on, right?
Right.
We were talking about all the different things and how important it is to assess and then see where the deficits are. Somebody wrote in and said, what if you didn't get diagnosed until your teen years?
Okay.
Same thing, isn't it?
There's really no difference. It's just a matter of kind of seeing where your skill set is at right now, determining goals of sort of what matters the most to you. Mm-hmm. And when I say you, I mean both the parent and the teen, right? Sit down with your son or daughter and say, what matters the most? What do you want to get out of life right now? What are some long-term goals for you? Is it making a friend? Is it seeing peers more on the weekends? Is it a particular hobby you want to get good at, a particular sport you want to play, getting better grades, whatever it is? Identify a few specific goals, and then you identify a few specific skills that you could practice that would get you closer to those goals.
So you can be asking the question, what do you want? But another way of getting at it too is, what's frustrating to you?
Absolutely.
What's frustrating you right now? What do you feel like you don't get?
Right, absolutely.
And I think you could ask that of most teenagers, actually, and it would be very beneficial for them, because I think most teenagers would say, I don't get it how everybody else just managed to feel cool.
Right, exactly.
I don't get it how this person got to be in this group of friends.
Right.
But you can target within that frustration, you can target a skill that will help them to be able to do that very thing.
Absolutely.
And that doesn't stop in the teen years even.
Right.
We've met more and more adults who have been diagnosed as adults as Asperger's, and then saying, okay, now I understand how I've been so frustrated all this time. But that doesn't mean you can't work on it.
Absolutely. And frankly, that applies for folks who aren't on the spectrum as well, kids or adults, right? Wherever we're at today, our skill set can be a little bit better tomorrow. We can make goals that move us closer to our values and closer to our outcomes that we want, regardless of who we are.
You know what I think about frequently? A show probably 2 years ago where I had you go through how did ABA come about, the whole history of ABA, and you talked about, and correct me if I'm completely up a tree here, but you talked about that in the beginning, somebody said, this is just a tool that can make the world a better place.
Right, exactly right. Yeah.
And I want to get that crocheted on a pillow. The ABA is just a tool that can make the world a better place.
That's exactly
it happens to be really, really effective with our kids on the autism spectrum, but that wasn't what it was designed for. It isn't the only thing it can be used for.
That's right.
Really, really remarkable. We've only got a minute and a half here, but anything going on at the Autism Research Group that you want to let people know about?
Oh, gee, too much to mention. Well, did we talk about the skills validation study that was published?
We have talked about that,
right? Yeah.
I've talked about that with Dr. Grampiche, and I talked about that with you. And
yeah, so we've talked that one out. Lots of other things. Well, we're doing a couple events coming up pretty soon. There's the Ought to Run event in Camarillo.
Okay.
That's for the Autism Society of America Ventura County chapter.
Awesome.
And I'm actually blanking on the date. I think it's March. I can't actually. No, it might be. It's either March or April. I'm not sure, but that's coming up. So we're gonna have a booth there. There's a 5K, 10K, 15K run too.
Okay.
That should be a lot of fun.
All right. And next week at the beginning, I'll remind you, and we'll have the dates for all of those. But people can go to your website and find out more.
autismresearchgroup.org.
Okay. So great place to go. And while you're there, fill out their survey about what kinds of things you'd like to see research about, because not everyone's asking you, but they are. All right. We thank you so much for being here and for all the wisdom that you impart all the time. It is so appreciated. I can't even begin to tell you. We are going to close out the show, but I want to remind you that we'll be back next Tuesday. We've got some really exciting topics as we go into February. We're focusing on inspirational stories from the autism spectrum. So if you have a story that you think is inspirational, or you've seen a story or know somebody who has a story, please have them contact us as soon as possible, because we're booking up the month and we really want to share in this month. It's going to be full of snow and dark for a lot of people, with a whole lot of hope from what's really happening in the autism community. So we'll be starting that on Tuesday. We've got some great guests that are going to be with us. And our usuals, again, Dr. Tarbox will be here, as will Dr. Grampiche and everyone else. So we'll be back. Until then, please give your kiddos a hug from me. Bye-bye for now.